Hey guys, tonight we're slipping back in time, way back to the banks of the Nile, where the lotus blooms just before dawn, and the perfume of crushed petals rides the mist like a whispered memory. You're not royalty, not a warrior, not even a priest. You're something softer, stranger. You are a perfumer. And not just any perfumer, a lotus perfumer, which means you spend your days boiling flower guts in crocodile fat and whispering prayers to a nosy jackal statue. You were born in a one-room reed hut with mats for walls and a fire pit dug into the dirt floor. It's humid, always. Your first memory, though, let's be honest, it's probably just a family story. You've heard too many times is the smell of warmed goat's milk and your mother's hands, scented faintly of mashed acacia pods and river clay. You scream, as all babies do, and your grandmother snorts. He's got strong lungs. He'll ruin good perfume someday. The Nile floods just after your second harvest. Everyone celebrates, because flooding means fertile silt, and fertile silt means more blue lotus. Your family grows a few papyrus stalks and keeps bees, but mostly, they scent things, oils, cloth, altars, and sometimes corpses. The family trade is humble but respected. Not everyone gets to touch what the gods breathe. You toddle around your mother's feet while she stirs a heavy ceramic pot of sweet marjoram steeping in castor oil. The scent is thick, cloying, almost but soothing. Nearby, your father slices dried rose petals with a bronze blade and hums something that might be a hymn, or might be about fish. Historians still argue whether perfumers were treated as low-level artisans or semi-sacred intermediaries. But in your house, it's all mixed. Sacred and stinky. Devotion and donkey sweat. One night, you crawl too close to a fire bowl and get your fingers smacked with a papyrus whisk. That's for oil only. Your uncle mutters, then hands you a chunk of beeswax as consolation. You chew it. You regret it. By the time you're 5, you can tell the difference between fresh lemongrass and dried fenugreek by smell alone. You also think the neighbor's cat is secretly a priest, but that's another story. Your family doesn't use scented amulets on you like the richer kids, but they do press a thumbprint of myrrh on your forehead each morning, mostly to ward off headaches, or maybe demons, or maybe to keep the flies away. It's not always clear. The scrolls never explain everything. During the hotter months, you sleep with your head near the cooling pots. Not out of choice, the perfume jars are fragile and too expensive to risk cracking in the heat. So you're the living thermometer if you sweat too much. Someone wakes up and moves the pots. One night, you dream of lotus petals drifting across the sky like stars. The next morning, you wake up sticky and glowing. You'll be a scent dreamer. Your grandmother declares, or you just peed. Either way, it's a milestone. Your siblings, both older, are apprenticed to brickmakers and papyrus weavers. They wrinkle their noses at your flour-smeared tunics. You try to explain how the blue lotus must be soaked at dawn, before its spirit retreats into the stem. But they've already stopped listening. Still, your parents watch you closely. The way you hover near boiling pots. The way you press your nose against baskets of dried herbs. One evening, your father sets down a bowl of boiled myrrh gum and says, "Blow on it. Tell me what it becomes." You inhale, exhale, squint and say it smells like dried tears. He smiles. A real smile. That's close enough. Quirky fact of the night. Ancient Egyptian babies were sometimes named after smell-sweet ones like Nefertari or odd ones like Kamwaset, meaning he who appears in Thebes. You're just called Tepi. It means first, but you'll become much more than that. Your mother teaches you how to tie the reed baskets so the flower heads don't bruise. Your aunt shows you how to read the colors of decay, when a petal is no longer sacred, just sludge. By 6, your fingers are always stained. By 7, your nose is impossibly good. You can tell if oil has turned just from the way it breathes out of clay. You've never been to the capital. You've never seen the Great Temple. But one afternoon, a traveling merchant passes through your village with a box of cedarwood files, each sealed with wax and painted with tiny blue hieroglyphs. You reach out to sniff one, and he stops you. That's royal. You touch, you buy, so you touch anyway. And it smells old, powerful, like the sun decided to remember something. That night, your dreams are restless, and so your journey begins not with fire or gold or prophecy, but with the scent of a single blue lotus crushed under your grandmother's heels. By the time you're 6, your chores shift from collecting reeds and chasing goats to something more fragrant. Sort of. Your grandmother decides it's time. You're handed a grinding stone smooth as river-pebbled bone, and a small pile of galbanum resin that looks like crusty honeycombs dipped in shadow. Start crushing, she says, already lighting a small dung fire under a terracotta bowl filled with old castor oil. And don't sneeze in the bowl this time. You crouch beside the fire pit, the ground warm beneath your knees, and begin grinding. Galbanum smells like old forests and bug wings. It's thick, green, strange, and strong. Your eyes water instantly. Good, your grandmother mutters. That means it's real. You resist the urge to rub your face. The trick, you learn, is rhythm, not pressure. You don't smash the resin, you coax it. You sing to it a little, like she does. Or maybe she's just humming because her joints hurt. Hard to tell. She hums the same tune when she's angry. The fire crackles, the oil burps. The air grows heavy, sticky. You keep grinding and grinding until the resin breaks down into powder, then paste, then something close to syrup. You stir it into the oil. The smell rises like a spell. Bitter, deep, sacred. You did that. You helped. In ancient Egyptian homes like yours, the hearth was everything. Cooking, crafting, worshipping, burning papyri with names of people you hated. You only tried that once. It smelled like regret and onion. Historians still argue whether children were officially apprenticed this young or simply used as free labor with unusually good noses. Either way, you're learning. Every day, you learn to recognize what oils are best for what tasks. Castor for base, moringa for layering, crocodile fat if you're desperate, and, unfortunately, sometimes you are. It's the worst smell-rotting meat mixed with fish dreams, but it makes sense last longer in desert heat. One day, your grandmother hands you a cracked bowl of frankincense. This one smells like temples, she says, but don't let it fool you. It'll cling to your fingers for weeks. You don't believe her. 3 weeks later, your fingers still reek. You start dreaming differently. Scents follow you into sleep. You dream of a sun made entirely of lemons, a moon that smells like bruised sandalwood, bees whispering ingredients you've never heard of, labdanum, spikenard, whisper flower. That last one probably isn't real, but your dream bees are oddly persuasive. Your family notices. Your uncle offers you a thin-bladed copper knife and teaches you how to trim petals without bruising them. Your mother lets you measure out powdered iris root for a woman who wants to smell like the river. She doesn't say anything, but afterward, you notice she gives you the fresher bread that night. Not all lessons are safe. You learn the hard way that heating cassia too quickly makes it spit. And it doesn't just burn, it curses. Your lips blister. Your pride stings more. Fire has to be respected. Your father says, even when it smells nice. A fringe belief floats around town that those who work with scent too long lose the ability to dream, that their minds become numb to beauty. You worry about that. A little, but then your grandmother buries her nose in your oil-soaked tunic and says, "You smell like the gods after a nap." And you relax. You help make incense cones for funerals. They're pressed into little triangles, stamped with prayer symbols, and dried in the shade. One time, a cat eats half a batch. You don't tell anyone. You simply add more rose powder and hope the deceased enjoys a bit of mischief in the afterlife. You learn to keep secrets. One day, your cousin, older, smarter, and far too curious, asks you if the gods have favorite smells. You say yes, obviously. Then, what does Seth smell like? She asks. You pause. You say, metal, fear, and roasted onions. She nods solemnly. You are now the family authority on divine body odor. Quirky fact of the night. Ancient Egyptians believed the gods themselves gave humans the ability to smell as a form of divine communication. So technically, every time you sniff a flower, you're getting a voice note from the universe. And here's a lesser-known one. Blue lotus isn't a true lotus. It's actually a type of water lily, but it doesn't matter. To your people, it's sacred, dreamy, euphoric. Some say it even makes you see beyond the veil, or just gives you very weird dreams about fish with legs. Your world is small but layered. Your family doesn't travel. The Nile provides most of what you need, and the occasional trader brings the rest. But you've begun to suspect that out there beyond the fields and the low hills, There are other noses, other hands, other oils. Sometimes, you dip your fingers into a bowl of perfume and whisper to it. You don't know what you're saying, but it listens. That's enough. The sun isn't up yet, but you are. The air is cool in that rare, honest way only dawn can manage before the goats start bleeding, before the ovens are lit, before someone yells at someone else about stepping on a drying mat. You creep barefoot across the dew-slick path, careful not to knock over the bowl of marinated herbs left soaking overnight. Today, you're going somewhere forbidden, or at least unsupervised. The temple gardens, not the little ones near your house, the big ones, the sacred ones, the ones behind the white walls guarded by statues of falcon gods and priests who can smell lies like bees smell sugar. You're not alone. Your cousin Nemi is with you. She's older by a year, faster by 2, and clever enough to know which priest is blind in one eye, left side. She whispers, "We go right," you nod, heart thudding like a pestle against stone. The wall is just high enough to make you doubt your bones. You climb anyway. Nemi boosts you. Your tunic snags on a sandstone lip and tears. You freeze. Keep going. She hisses. Your fear smells worse than the resin pit. You drop into the garden like a sack of onions. Soft grass cushions the fall. And suddenly, you're in another world. The scent hits you like a hymn. Blue lotus, mint, date blossoms, a hint of coriander trailing from a crushed stalk underfoot. It's overwhelming in the best possible way. You close your eyes, you breathe. If the afterlife has a lobby, this is probably it. The garden is arranged like a perfume recipe, squares of specific plants bordered by tiny irrigation ditches. Everything has order, purpose. You suspect the gods hired a perfectionist gardener. You and Nemi tiptoe past the beehives, duck under a pergola of draping honeysuckle, and reach the lotus pond. They're blooming. Big, full, sleepy-eyed blue lotuses, barely opening to the dawn. You've only ever seen them after harvest, half-wilted, limp, drained. But here, they float like prayers with petals. You wade an ankle deep, pluck one. Gently, no stem bruising, no splashing. Just like your grandmother taught, Nemi grabs 2. She's less subtle. "Quick," she whispers. "Let's go before the baboon shows up." You pause. "What baboon?" She grins. "The one that guards the east wall. They say he used to be a priest but got cursed." You laugh. Until something rustles in the fig tree. Out steps a baboon, or a very convincing statue that just decided to stretch. You both freeze. The baboon sits, blinks, then licks its hand and starts grooming itself. You and Nemi back away slowly, very slowly. Lotus flowers tucked against your chest like treasure maps. The baboon doesn't chase you. Instead, it yawns, massive, pink-mouthed, holy, and lets out a sound like it's tired of everyone else's drama. Which, honestly, is fair. You climb back over the wall with trembling legs and a shredded tunic. Nemi laughs the whole way. You want to scold her, but you're too breathless from relief and excitement. You dry the lotus flowers at home, lay them gently on reed mats. Their scent lingers long after the color fades. This batch smells deeper, sharper, sacred. Somehow, you mix a small amount into a trial oil with olive base. It separates oddly. You try again, still weird. Third time's the charm. The result is intoxicating, euphoric, almost dangerous. You know, because when your grandmother smells it, she stares off into the distance and whispers, "I remember his voice. I remember how he laughed." She won't tell you who, but she cries later that night. Historians still argue whether Blue Lotus was actually psychoactive or simply associated with altered states through ritual. What they don't know is that it feels magical. And sometimes, that's enough. Your mother tells you not to go back. She says the gods frown on theft. But when she thinks no one's looking, she dabs a bit of the new oil behind her ears and smiles into a clay mirror shard. Life returns to normal. Sort of. The baboon shows up again a few weeks later, this time on your side of the wall. Casually eating fermented figs near your house? Nemi claims it winked at her. You pretend you didn't see it mimic your walk. Quirky fact of the night. Sacred animals in ancient Egypt were sometimes mummified in elaborate ceremonies. Even baboons. There's even evidence of baboons being trained as ritual assistants or temple mascots, depending on which scroll you believe. That summer, your scent work improves. Your confidence grows. You start experimenting with combinations. Mint and myrrh, fig leaf and honey ash. You accidentally invent what might be the world's first deodorant. Your cousin thinks it smells like crushed hope, but the neighbor boy says you smell like sunrise. You're not sure which is better. And always, in the background of your work, floats the memory of that garden. The moment the lotus opened, the way the scent stayed in your chest long after your hands stopped shaking. You never do tell your grandmother where that flower came from, but you catch her humming the baboon's yawn lullaby once, and you both pretend not to notice. 12 is the age of dust in your eyes and calluses on your fingers. Not because you've grown lazy, but because you've been chosen. One morning, after breakfast and before the fire is lit, your father hands you a reed scroll sealed with beeswax and says, "It's time." You blink. Time for what? To carry heavy jars and listen more than you talk. Your grandmother mutters from the corner. He's sending you to Master Harik. Your heart skips, then stumbles. Harik is the senior perfumer who supplies the temple. He has apprentices, real ones who walk straight and use big words like steeping ratios and solvent drift. He also once yelled at a donkey for standing too close to his date oil rack. The scroll is simple, a formal agreement. If you prove useful, you stay. If not, you come home smelling of failure and pine tar. So you go. Master Harik's workshop is bigger than your entire house. The front wall is stacked with clay jars sealed in linen. The back opens onto a shaded courtyard lined with drying petals and bowls of resin. You don't even make it 3 steps before someone shoves a ladle into your hand and says, "Stir until your elbow screams." Welcome to apprenticeship. You stir and sweat and learn. Your days blur into rhythms, grinding before breakfast, boiling after, filtering oils through cloth twisted tighter than temple scrolls, chiseling myrrh lumps the size of small goats. Every night you come home reeking of things most people only smell at funerals or royal banquets. You drop things. You get yelled at. Once, you sneeze into a vat of freshly crushed coriander. Everyone remembers. Your hands become maps of minor burns. Your arms carry bruises shaped like amphora rims. But you grow stronger, quieter. Your sense of smell sharpens like a flint blade. One afternoon, you're assigned to clean the dark bench. A low shelf tucked beneath the main table, coated in decades of waxy residue and discarded samples. You find a tiny jar, sealed in gold foil. Curious, you open it. It smells like silence. Not absence, silence. Like a breath held too long. Like the space between words during a fight. You snap the lid back on. "Don't touch that again," says Harik, who's appeared out of nowhere like a sandal-wearing ghost. That scent was for the king of Byblos. He died before it cured. You nod, heart racing. He stares at you for a long time. Then, you have a good nose. Don't waste it on curiosity. Historians still debate whether perfumes were treated more as cosmetics or medicines. But here, in this workshop, they are both. You make healing oils for aching backs. You make seduction balms for merchant wives. You make funeral paste for those who whisper no more. And through it all, you watch, learn, memorize. You learn that boiling too hot makes oils bitter. That too much fenugreek turns joy into nausea. That a drop of almond can cancel out 2 hours of rose preparation. The smallest thing ruins the biggest plan. You also learn who to avoid. There's a senior apprentice named Beck. He's smug, neat, always smells like papyrus and smugness. He accidentally swaps your cedarwood batch with expired castor oil. The resulting stench peels paint off the temple wall. You get blamed. Of course, your punishment. Boil sandalwood base for 5 straight hours without leaving the post. The trick isn't endurance, it's patience. You hum to stay awake. Eventually, your hums turn to whispers. Then words. You're not sure who you're talking to. Maybe the oil, maybe yourself, maybe something listening. At the end, Herrick walks past, sniffs once, and mutters, "Didn't burn." Good. It's the closest thing to praise you've ever gotten. Quirky fact. Ancient Egyptians believed words spoken near perfume could charge it with meaning. Some temples even employed oil whisperers whose job was to speak blessings into mixtures. You're pretty sure you're doing it wrong, but something seems to respond. One day, a messenger arrives from the temple. A priest has asked for a specific blend: blue lotus, frankincense, myrrh, and a base oil soaked in linen that once belonged to a former priestess. You don't ask questions. You measure, grind, heat, whisper. You're allowed to carry the finished jar to the temple yourself. It's your first time inside. The walls shimmer with paintings older than anyone you know. The air is cold in that sacred, spine-tingling way. You walk past a line of priests humming a tone so low you feel it in your bones. At the altar, the head priest opens the jar, sniffs once, and nods. You honor the gods, he says. You bow. Outside, you find a piece of silver tucked into your tunic. Payment, respect, or maybe a bribe to keep quiet. Either way, you don't mention it to Herrick. You keep the coin. Smell it sometimes? It smells like sweat and thunder. Historians wonder how apprentices were trained scrolls or spoken word. For you, it's hands and mistakes, and repetition, and moments like these, standing in temple shade, hands still scented, heart too full for words, and somewhere deep in that sacred silence, you realize you belong. You hear about the festival comb 2 weeks before the feast. Not from Master Hari. Of course not. He doesn't tell apprentices anything until the last possible moment. Usually while pointing at something that's either on fire or just about to be. No. You hear it from the salt merchant's daughter, who comes by humming a tune too precise to be casual. The royal cousin's feast is coming. She whispers, they need perfume, the kind that makes people cry. She's right. The next morning, Herrick calls you over with a grunt and tosses you a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a festival comb, wide-toothed, carved from polished tamarisk wood and soaked in pure oil. He says, you're scenting this. That's it. That's your instruction. You stare at the comb like it's made of gold. For this feast, nobles will comb perfume directly into their hair before prayers and dancing. The scent must be rich but not cloying, sacred but seductive, and long-lasting enough to survive hours of ritual flute solos. The base is already infused with henna and sweet almond. Your job is to layer it. You start with blue lotus. Of course, always blue lotus, but not too much it overwhelms easily. You add just a drop of benzoin, a trace of fig sap, and something strange. Dried peppermint ash. The scent begins to lean too sweet. You counter with a touch of aged frankincense, smoky, resinous, complex. It's perfect until it isn't. Because while lifting the comb to coat it evenly, your elbow knocks the edge of the bowl. It tilts. You freeze. Time slows. The bowl slides and spills all over your robe. Silence. Herrick says nothing, just stares. Then, calmly, do you know how much that was worth? You nod. You think you nod. He walks away. You stand there, soaked in what was meant to anoint royalty, smelling like a blessed forest accident. The apprentices avoid you the rest of the day. Beck mutters something under his breath about perfume boy becoming perfume puddle. You stay late. Clean everything twice. Try not to cry. You fail. The next morning, Herrick hands you another comb, says nothing. You begin again. This time, slower, gentler, no distractions. You breathe with the rhythm of the brush strokes. Scent, pause, brush, scent, pause, brush, and you whisper, not a prayer, just quiet promises, that this scent will linger, that it will awaken memory, that it won't be forgotten like so many things are. When it's ready, the comb is wrapped in linen soaked with cedar essence and sent off under escort. You think that's the end of it. But days later, a priestess stops by the workshop. She's tall, severe, with eyes like she already knows what you forgot to do. She doesn't look at you when she speaks. Who made the second comb? Herrick nods toward you. You step forward, certain. This is your final day. But she says, the scent survived dancing, which is, frankly, the highest compliment in temple circles. She leaves without another word. But later that day, you find an extra honey cake beside your tools. No note. just the scent of almond and cinnamon. Historians still argue whether scent had rank, whether temple perfumes were secretly graded or publicly revered. All you know is, if your scent made it to the altar and back with applause, you've officially graduated to not being ignored. That night, Nemi visits. You tell her everything. She grins. You spilled holy perfume on yourself and somehow got promoted. I didn't get promoted, you mutter. You got a honey cake, she says. Same thing. You both laugh. Later, when she's gone, you find yourself brushing oil into your own hair for the first time. Just a little, just enough to remember. Quirky fact: some nobles were buried with perfume combs still in their wigs, sealed in resin and gold foil. Archaeologists once found a comb scented with what turned out to be a 6-ingredient balm, including cinnamon, cardamom, and something they still can't identify, probably ambition. From then on, you're allowed to prepare festival blends more often. You gain a reputation for balance, never too much of one note. Harik says nothing. Of course. But he stops double-checking your measurements. You begin to trust your nose, and your hands, and your silence. Because perfume isn't always about what people smell, it's what they remember once it's gone. It starts with a papyrus scroll, not the fancy temple kind sealed with lacquer and warnings. No, this one is smudged, wrinkled, and smells like date paste. Harik hands it to you without comment. On it, a list of ingredients, half a recipe, and a drawing of what might be a goat. You frown. What does this say? He shrugs. Figure it out. You want to be more than a mixer, right? Of course you do. So, you learn to read. Or at least, you try. You've known the basics, simple glyphs for oils, quantities, prayers. But this is deeper. This is the language of blending. The difference between simmer and scald, between rose essence and rose sediment, between writing cedarwood and accidentally writing donkey dung, which you do twice. In front of Harik, he laughs once. An actual laugh, like air escaping a too-tight jar, and says, well, maybe the donkey needs to smell holy. 2. You study harder. There's a smaller room behind the main workshop, rarely used. It holds stacks of old scrolls, dried inks, and a reed mat worn soft by elbows. You claim a corner. At night, by the low glow of a ghee lamp, you copy symbols over and over. Your fingers cramp. Your eyes sting, but eventually, the words begin to unfold, and with them, recipes long forgotten. One scroll describes an ink made from rosewater, frankincense, and crushed beetles, meant for writing love letters. Another includes a note in the margin, add mint only if he is a soldier. Otherwise, he'll cry. Quirky fact of the night: some ancient Egyptian inks were indeed perfumed, especially those used for blessings or royal correspondence. Imagine getting a letter that smells faintly of honey and sandalwood. Even the insult at the end would feel softer. Your handwriting improves. You stop turning cedar wood into compost. You begin writing your own notes, blends that worked, ones that failed, dreams you had that maybe mean something. One day, you're asked to write the labels for a shipment to the upper temple. You choose your best glyphs, no mistakes. But while labeling the jar for rose and cinnamon balm, you freeze. What if you added a joke? Just one. Instead of rose of light, you label it rose of slight panic. Tiny script, hardly noticeable. You regret it immediately, but the jar is taken. No one says anything for days. Then one afternoon, the priestess from the festival, Comb, returns. She walks past you, doesn't break stride. But as she leaves, she murmurs, "The slight panic worked wonders." You nearly drop your ink brush. Historians still argue whether scribes in perfume houses were considered full artisans or merely glorified inventory keepers. You don't care, because now you understand something important. The story behind the scent matters. The words we wrap around a smell change how we feel it. So you start writing scent poems, quietly, anonymously. Smells like honey melting in a sunbeam, like cedarwood waking up after a nap, like the memory of someone you almost loved. You tuck them into jars, into shipments, into scrolls. Some get returned, some get copied. One appears weeks later, scrawled on a temple wall. Nemi reads it and smirks. You're secretly famous, not secretly enough. You whisper, after Harik assigns you to inventory clay jars for 6 straight hours as punishment. Still, it's worth it. You learn to mix your own ink, balancing soot and water with gum arabic. You add drops of perfume, Carefully, not too much, or the glyphs will smudge, but just enough, and they glow. Words that smell good get remembered. And one evening, while testing a blend of lavender and acacia, you write something small on a reed slip. If the gods had fingers, they'd press this behind their ears. You fold it, slip it into the base of a lotus jar, and smile. Because now, you're not just a perfumer, you're a writer of scent, a scribe of air. Love, you learn, smells like burnt honey. It begins innocently enough. A new apprentice arrives late teens, sharp cheekbones, and a scent trail that lingers in the air like someone just whispered a secret through myrrh smoke. Their name is Nahir, and they wear cassia the way others wear armor. Thick, unapologetic, and almost too much. Your first thought, that's too much cassia. Your second thought, I hope they stand next to me again. They do. You're assigned to the same blend table for a festival order. Temple-grade incense cones for a river procession. It's delicate work. Measure, mix, knead into shapes. You go too fast. Nahir goes too slow. You argue, you laugh, you drop a cone into your sleeve. Nahir throws powdered cinnamon at you. Later, you catch yourself smiling at the stain. The cones are baked, boxed, and blessed. The scent spicy, warm, comforting remains on your hands long after, and you find yourself adding cassia to everything. Just a hint, just enough to say, I noticed you. Quirky fact. Cassia was sometimes considered an aphrodisiac in ancient Egypt. Whether or not it truly stirred desire is up for debate, but let's just say some scrolls contain very enthusiastic odes to its properties. You and Nahir begin sneaking each other test samples. A too-sweet fig balm, a burnt patchouli accident, a rose and cinnamon blend that actually works. You invent new names. Temple trouble, almost incense, midnight noise. One afternoon, they hand you a sealed jar with no label. You open it. Burnt honey, crystallized, smoky, haunting. It's wrong. It's perfect. This smells like heartbreak. You say, Nahir grins. Or dinner gone wrong. You keep the jar. But things change. They always do. Nahir is reassigned, promoted. Technically, transferred to a perfume house near the capital. You pretend to be happy. You'll do great. You say, you'll write. They reply, I'll smell your words. And they're gone. Historians still argue whether perfumers traveled often or if major houses recruited from the provinces. What's certain is once someone leaves your scent circle, everything feels quieter. You stop using cassia, not out of spite, just respect. The absence is its own kind of presence. One evening, while inventorying oils, you find a slip of papyrus stuck under a jar. It's Nahir's handwriting, just one line. Some flowers bloom only at night, so do some people. You don't cry. You do remake the burnt honey blend. Once, just once. It's sharper now, more bitter, less sweet. You name it. Ghost sugar. You store it in the back and move forward. Love, you realize, doesn't always end with a door slam or a farewell speech. Sometimes it ends with a scent that lingers too long in an empty workshop, with the muscle memory of a smile you can't use anymore. And sometimes it ends with a shelf that smells like memories burnt, bottled, and quietly waiting. The taster arrives just after sunrise, too early, too loud, and smelling like someone overslept in a cedar chest. He's from the palace. You can tell by the gold-trimmed sandals and the way he picks up jars with 2 fingers, as if afraid scent might stain his soul. Herrick calls him the nose, but not in a flattering way. More like you'd say, the pest. He sniffs, he scoffs, he scribbles, then he pauses. What's this one? He asks, lifting a jar you'd tucked into the trial shelf last week. The one with too much lotus. The one you were sure had failed. That's a mistake. You say. He sniffs again. No, that's fashion. You blink. He waves a scroll. The pharaoh's inner circle wants a new blend. Less temple. More river. Lush. Dreamy. This one makes my ears ring. That's probably the over-concentration of lotus. You mutter. He's already writing. Triple the batch. Add civet. Maybe. Or don't. I'll take credit either way. He leaves, and you're stunned. Your mistake. You're oversaturated, slippery. Too rich lotus balm is now the next royal trend. Historians still argue whether the ancient Egyptian court followed perfume fads the way nobles later did in Rome and France. But one thing's clear: if the nose likes it, the palace follows. So you prepare the batch. It's terrifying. Every drop matters. You balance lotus with wine-soaked resins, soften the mix with a trace of almond oil, and anchor it with a barely there touch of labdanum, just enough to give it weight without dragging it into gloom. You test it on a swatch of linen. Let it rest. Wait. Then, in a moment of dangerous curiosity, you wear it. Just a dab behind the ear. And suddenly, you understand, it doesn't just smell like the river. It feels like one slipping over skin, soft and wild, with something hidden beneath the surface. A mystery. A pull. You close your eyes and see stars in the shape of fish. You name it. Nilotic drift. Even Herrick seems impressed. Still too much, he says, then adds, but too much in the right direction. The palace sends a second scroll. They want more, not just for the pharaoh's court, but for dancers, high priests, visiting dignitaries. Your blend is now on everyone's skin, and some of them are pretending they invented it. You don't mind much. But one day, while checking the jar seals, you find a note tucked under the lid of a royal order. My husband wore this to bed. I dreamed of our wedding again. Thank you. No name, just that. You sit down and breathe deeply. Quirky fact: ancient Egyptians often linked dreams and scents. Some rituals included perfume pillows or oils designed to encourage visions of loved ones, ancestors, or even gods. Whether it worked is unclear, but emotionally, it absolutely did. And now, your mistake has entered dreams. You begin experimenting with more confidence. Not recklessness, but boldness. You play with sandalwood dust, with salt crystals soaked in vinegar, with hibiscus boiled until its color screams. Not all of them work. One trial makes you sneeze for an hour. Another melts through the linen base. A third turns pitch black and smells like wet frogs. But you're learning. Always learning. And slowly, people come to trust your nose. Even Beck, who once swapped your ingredients out of spite, starts asking for your second opinion. You pretend not to enjoy it. Herrick watches, says nothing. But one evening, after everyone's gone, he hands you a blank scroll and a fresh reed pen. Write what only you can smell, he says. So you do. You write about fear, about sweetness, about longing. You write about overboiled lotus and the sound of someone breathing just out of sight. You write about how mistakes, when left alone long enough, sometimes bloom into beauty. And you write the name Nilotic drift in ink made from crushed rose petals and vinegar. Just once. Just big enough to remember. You never thought you'd be the one preparing your master's burial perfume. But here you are. The workshop is too quiet, the fire pit cold. Herrick's tools have been wrapped in linen and tied with red thread, the ritual of sealing a life's work. No one speaks above a whisper, and every jar feels heavier, like the air has thickened with grief and cedar smoke. Herrick didn't believe in long goodbyes. One moment, he was arguing with a merchant over cardamom quality. The next, he was gone. Fever, they said. Quick, quiet. Like a scent that vanishes before you realize it's moved. The temple sends word, you've been chosen to prepare his burial blend. You want to protest. You're not the eldest apprentice, not even the most senior, but the priest simply says, his scrolls name you, so you begin. It's not a perfume. Not exactly. Burial blends are sacred, half preservative, half prayer. They must comfort the spirit and preserve the body, and they must honor the scent of a person's life. You start with goat fat. Unromantic, yes, but essential, rendered smooth. It forms the base for the embalming paste. You stir it slowly, watching it cool into something solid and quietly obedient. Then come the resins. Myrrh, of course, his favorite. Frankincense, ground fine. A trace of galbanum. You remember how he'd mutter about too much sweetness whenever you overused lotus, so you skip it entirely. Instead, you add a pinch of charred cinnamon dust. Sharp, dry, unapologetic. And then, something you've never done before. You speak, not to anyone, not out loud, but as you mix, you whisper stories, small memories, moments. How he once saved a broken batch by boiling it twice. How he let you redo the festival comb after you ruined the first. How he never smiled, except when he smelled something new. You seal it all in the blend. Historians still argue whether embalmers and perfumers were ever the same profession. Technically, they were distinct. But in moments like this, when your hands measure death with the same care they once measured joy, it's hard to see a difference. You carry the jar to the house of purification yourself. The priests there nod. They unwrap Harik's body. Thin, cold, waxy. He smells faintly of old scrolls and sandalwood, like he's halfway between here and memory. You anoint his skin. Every line, every joint, every scar. It's methodical, gentle. You work in silence, but inside your chest, something aches with each touch. You remember his scowl, his sharpness, the way he'd pretend not to notice when you stayed late. You remember the first time he called you good. The burial blend goes on last, thick and warm. It darkens his skin, makes him gleam slightly in the candlelight. A final gift, you press a dab behind each ear so the gods can smell who's coming. Quirky fact, some mummies have been found with scent sachets inside their wrappings. Little bundles of herbs or resins, like spiritual potpourri. One even had a piece of scented wax tucked under the tongue. A message, maybe, or just comfort. As the body is wrapped, you're given one last task. Prepare the oil for the funerary statue, a symbolic version of Harik, carved in wood, painted with care. The statue will be blessed, anointed, and placed in the tomb to stand in for him. You mix a lighter blend this time. Olive oil, a trace of acacia flower, and a drop of vetiver. It smells like early mornings, like the space between chores, like breath held before the fire is lit. You rub it into the statue's brow. Its wooden face shines, and then it's done. Harik is gone. And you return to the workshop. It's quiet, but not empty. You light the fire. The jars await. And for the first time, you realize something. You're the master now. Not officially. Not yet. But in your hands, the workshop breathes again. And Harik, in his own way, is still here. In the shelves he stacked, in the notes he scribbled, in the jar you open next, which smells exactly like a scolding that turned into a lesson. You smile, then you whisper, not too much sweetness, and begin the next blend. You're the master now. Well, unofficially. No ceremony. No title carved in limestone. But people start bringing your name up first when they need something mixed. The apprentices defer to your nose. The merchants stop haggling quite so hard. Even the temple clerks, those bureaucrats in perfumed linen and permanent frowns, start nodding when you speak. And still, you keep getting the frankincense ratios wrong. You don't know why. You've measured it 100 times. You've ground it finer than flour. You've adjusted the oil base, the drying time, the heat level, but somehow, the final scent always leans too far into dream. People either fall asleep mid-ritual or claim they can hear whispers from the jars. Good. One priest tells you after a trial batch, it smells like judgment. That's not the goal. You say, he shrugs. It works, so you leave it. You label the jar Whisper Balm and ship it off to the temple. Weeks later, a woman shows up at your workshop. She looks tired in the way only grief can carve. She clutches the jar like a relic. My sister passed while wearing this, she says softly. I've kept her linens unwashed. You nod. There's nothing else to say. Historians still argue whether frankincense was more valued for its ritual power or its calming effects in your hands. It seems to do both, especially when you don't mean it to. You write the ratios down anyway. You'll get it right someday. Your workshop now has a rhythm all its own. Apprentices show up early. Oils simmer before sunrise. You've even trained a half-blind cat named Seishu to avoid stepping in drying trays. Bekhu, against all expectations, never left, becomes your unlikely assistant. He's grown quieter over the years, less competitive, more observant. Sometimes you catch him watching you work, not out of jealousy, but something like curiosity. You still whisper to the oils, he asks one morning. You pause, then nod, only when they're listening. And they do. Sometimes, you begin keeping a bad shelf, not for mistakes exactly, but for weird things. Jars that reacted strangely, blends that smelled too sharp, or too soft, or too much like secrets. One is a mix of date sap and ash, that smells like an argument you once overheard. Another just smells like wet sandals. You don't sell them, but you keep them. They matter. Quirky fact. Some tombs include scent libraries, rows of sealed jars labeled with nothing but faint glyphs. No one knows if they were gifts, experiments, or simply the record of a nose's lifetime. You wonder if your bad shelf might outlast your good one. One blend on that shelf is particularly troubling. It smells fine when you mix it, smooth, balanced, even elegant. But once it sits for a few hours, it turns sour, like spoiled fruit and broken promises. You call it ambition no. 2. You don't know what went wrong, and that haunts you. Because the more you know, the more you realize how little you control. Some days the oils just don't behave. Some days your hands feel clumsy, your nose unreliable, your instincts dull. Other days, everything sings. You make a new daily blend for the apprentices, bright, herbal, light on resin. A mix of crushed thyme, dried orange peel, and coriander. They start calling it Sun Elixir. You didn't name it, but you don't object. One night, while cleaning the mixing bench, you find a tiny petal tucked under a jar, blue lotus, dried, fragile, probably from an old batch. It still smells like mornings, and you remember the garden. You remember Nemi's laughter, the baboon, the thrill of climbing that wall. You remember why you started. So you take the petal, crush it into a jar of almond oil, and label it nothing. No name, no glyph, just a fingerprint pressed into the clay. And you leave it on the shelf. Not everything needs a title. Some things just belong. You've never traveled far from home. The Nile has always been your mapfla de sewing, scent to ritual, oil to memory. But now, the caravan is leaving, and you're going with it. The temple requested a rare balsam only found deep beyond the dunes, near the distant coast of Punt. And they trust you to get it. Not because you're the fastest, or the bravest, but because no one else knows how to tell true balsam from the fake stuff that smells like boiled onion and regret. So, you pack lightly. 2 changes of linen, a pouch of frankincense for trade, or bribes, or both, and 1 small jar of your own blend just in case someone needs convincing. The caravan is dusty, slow, and full of personalities. There's a spice merchant who won't stop humming, a guard who sleeps with one eye open and one hand on his sword, and a donkey named Maru who bites only the people he likes. You make friends with a trader named Jet. He sells dried pomegranate and swears he's allergic to lavender. It makes my dreams too loud. He says, you don't ask. The days are long. The sun, merciless. Your skin cracks. Your oil stores melt and need constant stirring. You learn to sleep sitting up. You learn that sand finds its way into everything. You sneeze saffron one morning, but you also learn that the desert has a scent all its own, hot wind and crushed rock and sun-warmed dust. It's not pleasant, exactly, but it's honest. Quirky fact. Some ancient Egyptian perfumes were made specifically for travel, thicker balms designed to withstand the heat. With extra resin to preserve the base, you start developing your own version while riding a camel named, ironically, Lotus. She does not approve. When you finally reach the coast, it smells like another planet. Salt air, wet earth, fermented fruit, and something you can't place sweet, sharp, animal. The balsam trees are guarded by locals who speak through gesture and scent. They burn certain woods to show hospitality, offer oils on woven fans instead of shaking hands. You present your blend almond, clove, and a faint hint of honey. 1 sniff, and they smile. You're in. They let you inspect the resin. True balsam, thick and golden, sticky as sin. You dip a reed and test the scent. Sharp, warm, unplaceable. It coils in the air like a question you almost understand. You barter. You trade. You smile more than usual. You also get swindled once. A man sells you aged myrrh that turns out to be tinted sheep fat. Jeet laughs until he snorts date juice out his nose. On the return trip, the balsam jars are sealed tight and buried in cool linen sacks. You carry one close to your chest. It smells like new stories. One evening, under a star-drenched sky, Jid asks you why you care so much about scent. He says, you treat it like it's sacred. You pause, then say, because it's the only thing that's still there when everything else is gone. He nods like he understands. You're not sure he does, but he offers you the last of his dried mango. It smells like sunburn and sugar. You return weeks later, covered in dust. Tired, but successful, the temple accepts the balsam with silence. Then, with a nod, Beck hands you a fresh cloth when you collapse into the workshop. Lavender again. He jokes. You shake your head. Worse, mango. The next day, you unwrap your sample jar. Blend a small amount with myrrh, fig oil, and the faintest touch of sandalwood. You name it. Desert memory. It smells like heat, laughter, and something hard-earned. And it lingers. Just like you. You sleep inside the vault for a month. Not because you're punished. Not even by accident. It's by request, temple request. The high priestess herself sends a scroll. Observe the bloom cycles. Record their scent. Match them to the stars. The vault is hidden beneath the temple of Heket, a cold, damp chamber carved from limestone, lined with shallow stone shelves. On each, a jar, a petal, or a tightly bundled flower wrapped in linen. No sunlight, just slow-burning lamps, the occasional reed mat, and the rustle of something that may or may not be alive in the walls. It's peaceful, in a deeply haunted kind of way. You lay out your tools, thin brushes, parchment, oil stone lamp, and a hand mirror to catch the angles of rare blooms. Your job. Note when each flower begins to soften, when it exudes scent, and when it falls. You sleep nearby to catch the moment of change. And they do change. The white lotus opens first 2 days ahead of schedule, scent thick like butter and salt. You barely finish your note before another starts to open, an iris. The color of bruised linen. It smells like copper and memory. You begin to suspect these flowers know you're here. Each night, you sleep curled between the walls of scent. It changes your dreams. The first week, bees, not normal bees, tall bees, with scrolls for wings and voices like boiling water. They buzz around you, demanding the perfect scent for a forgotten god. When you fail, they sting your ears and fly into your mouth. The second week, silence. Your dreams contain only blank scrolls. You wake feeling incomplete. Then, the third week, the ghost. She doesn't speak. She smells like aged resin, oil-soaked wood, and temple linen. She watches you, sometimes sits beside you. Once, you wake to find your brush moved. The note beside it reads, "Not enough myrrh." You don't tell anyone. Quirky fact. Some ancient Egyptian vaults were believed to be inhabited by spirits of former perfumers or scent guardians. Offerings of oil were left on the equinoxes, and some priests refused to sleep inside overnight for fear of being rewritten. You stay anyway, because you're beginning to see the pattern. The flowers don't just open on moon cycles, they respond to scent. You dab a little cinnamon oil near the jasmine 3 hours later. It opens early. You try frankincense near the hibiscus. It doesn't bloom at all. But sandalwood, immediate response. You begin charting responses, building a map. One morning, you step out of the vault for fresh air. The world feels brighter, sharper, like your nose has upgraded. You can smell the baker's bread 2 streets away. You can smell your own heartbeat. You take the data to the temple. The high priestess reads in silence, nodding slowly. Then, "We'll send this to the stargazers." You never see that chart again. But later, a junior priest mentions they adjusted the festival calendar slightly because of something floral. You suspect it's your work. Your reputation shifts. People now call you the dream nose. You don't love it, but you don't argue. Back at the workshop, you try to recreate one of the vault's scents, ghost linen and temple wood. You mix labdanum, cedar, and a faded lotus petal. It smells close but not right. Too clean. Not haunted enough. So, you let it age. 2 weeks later, it changes. There's a stillness to it, a hush. You label it petal silence. You place it on the high shelf. And when the lamp flickers just so, you swear the ghost is watching, still not speaking, but maybe listening. The message arrives sealed in violet wax, stamped with the queen's crest, 2 papyrus blooms crossed behind a sun disk. Beck finds it wedged awkwardly between a shipment of sesame oil and a jar of crushed amber. He holds it like it's cursed. Should I burn it or give it to you? You take it. Inside, a scroll with a single line. The queen desires a scent that belongs to no one else. You read it 3 times, then sit down. Because what does that even mean? The temple perfumes have dozens of blends, each matched to a deity, ritual, or seasonal festival. The royal houses already have custom oils, with ingredients imported from every corner of the known world. But this is different. This is not a request for luxury. It's a request for identity. You are summoned the next morning. Palace guards meet you at the dock. Their robes smell of cedar smoke and tightly folded authority. The bark ride across the inner canal is quiet, except for one guard who hums something oddly familiar. You realize it's the melody Nemi used to sing while drying hibiscus petals. Inside the palace, the world changes. Everything is stone and silence and the kind of wealth that hums instead of shouts. You're led through echoing corridors, past halls of incense and glass, past statues who seem to judge your posture, and then the queen. She is younger than you expected, her eyes lined in kohl, her voice like cold wine. She does not ask for pleasantries. I don't want to smell like a goddess, she says. I want to smell like myself, like a woman who remembers and forgets on purpose. You nod slowly. That's a tall order. She raises an eyebrow. So was building this palace. You ask questions, not about her rank but her childhood, her favorite season, the flower she crushed into the hem of her robe at age 7, the fruit she hated in summer, the color she feels most like in the dark. She answers, and your mind begins mixing before your hands do. You return home and start at once. Base, pomegranate oil rich, sensual, grounding. Mid-notes, mulberry resin. Not common, but sharp with memory. A touch of violet, dried and crushed, for something fleeting. A hint of mint, for the coolness in her voice. And finally, just a shimmer, jasmine burned over fig bark. The scent is unexpected, regal but human, bold but not loud. When you test it on your wrist, it makes your own memories rise like steam. You call it crown of smoke. The scroll back from the palace contains just one word. Yes, you're summoned again, this time to the queen's private chamber. No guards, no ceremony, just her. She gestures toward the jar. Apply it. You hesitate. She raises an eyebrow. Do I look like I fear scent? You dab the oil onto her wrists, her neck, the back of her knees, traditional application points. But this moment feels different. Sacred. Somehow, not religious. Personal. She inhales, exhales, then whispers, "This will outlive me." You nod. Quirky fact. Some queens of Egypt were buried with exclusive perfumes no one else was allowed to wear. Recipes were destroyed, gardens were burned. Scent as legacy, scent as secret. You leave the palace with an empty jar and a full heart. Back in the workshop, Beck hands you a scroll. Another order. You shake your head. A thank you. He grins. So, you're the queen's nose now. You shrug for today and tomorrow. Tomorrow, you begin again. Your joints ache more now, not from illness, not yet, but from repetition, from decades of stirring, grinding, pouring, wrapping. Your fingers remember every jar shape. Your elbows predict the weight of oil. Your knees complain every time you crouch to fetch resin from the lower shelf, and they're right too. But your nose has never been sharper. There's a moment, just after sunrise, when the air in the workshop is perfect cool, balanced. Awake, you light a small bowl of sandalwood, breathe in, and know within 2 seconds whether the batch you made yesterday is going to age well. That's mastery. Young perfumers visit you now. They sit across from you with stained robes and impatient hands, asking about ratios and burn time, about viscosity and market demand. You answer when you can, but more often you ask questions they're not ready for. Does this scent make you feel something? What's the silence in this blend? Where would you wear it that you wouldn't want to be remembered? Some blink, some leave, but the best ones stay. You teach them gently. You show them how to sing a blend into balance, how to smell a lie in a jar of sandalwood, how to tell the difference between too much and just enough. You tell them how not every mistake is a failure, how your most celebrated blend came from too much lotus and a royal taster with a deviated septum. Quirky fact. In some ancient scrolls, it suggested that master perfumers could hear scent synesthetic blending. They called it, you always thought that was nonsense. Until one day, while steeping a batch of balsam and thyme, you swear the oil hummed. You hum back. One apprentice, A boy named Niferu reminds you of yourself, always sniffing before speaking. He asks once, "When do you know it's your scent?" You answer, "When it follows you into sleep." Your bad shelf is fuller now, not with failures, with fragments. Each blend holds a story you're not ready to finish. One smells like a sandstorm, one like missing someone who never knew your name, one like laughing in the wrong moment but not regretting it. You rarely name them anymore because you don't need to. You create one final blend for the temple, an anointing oil for a new priestess. She is young, firm-spoken, with eyes like polished hematite. She asks you if the gods care about perfume. You say, "Only when we forget to." She nods, leaves with the jar. Later, you hear the priests whisper, "It was the only oil that didn't burn the altar cloths." You smile. Quietly, there's talk of carving your name onto a workshop wall, of adding your ratios to the temple scrolls, of passing down petal silence as a training scent. You don't object, but you don't linger on it either. One evening, as the sun lowers over the Nile, you sit outside the workshop with a bowl of citrus oil and a reed fan. The breeze catches the scent, carries it down the street. A child stops, sniffs, and smiles. You don't say a word. You just lean back, joints sore but heart light, and let the scent carry your story forward. Because your hands may falter, but your blends, they still whisper. You know what this blend is for? The scroll arrived last week, unsigned but sealed with blue wax, a quiet signal from the temple mortuary. No words were needed, just the symbol of a folded papyrus and a single lotus. It's time to prepare your own burial perfume. You thought you'd feel more fear, or maybe sorrow, but what you feel most is curiosity. What scent should you become? You begin with stillness. The workshop is quiet now. No apprentices tonight. Just you, the low oil lamp, and the old bowls, each one seasoned by decades of mistakes, experiments, and joy. You choose the one with the tiny hairline crack, the one you've patched 3 times but refuse to replace. It's as flawed as you are. It's perfect. You warm the base oil slowly. No goat fat this time. You opt for sweet almond, smoother, lighter. Death doesn't have to be heavy. First, you add blue lotus, not because it's sacred, but because it was your beginning. The scent of that forbidden garden, that first stolen petal, that baboon who may or may not have been divine. Then a drop of myrrh, always myrrh. It anchors the soul. You pause. Consider rose, but instead reach for mulberry sap, less pretty, more personal. You crush dried mint for sharpness, then stir in a shaving of sandalwood that once sat near your first true blend, the one that accidentally made a priest cry. And finally, just a whisper burnt honey. You smile. Nahir would laugh at that. The scent rises, warm, bittersweet, and somehow familiar, like a story half remembered. You dab a little behind your ears. Old habit. Historians still argue whether Egyptians prepared their own embalming blends or left it to family or priests. But you know the truth. Some of us choose to leave our scent in our own hands. You place the finished jar into the cedar box you carved yourselves. Simple, unpainted. But inside, a folded reed slip with your final blend written in ink made from acacia gum and fig ash. No title, just this. If breath could remember, you seal it. And that night, you sleep deeper than you have in years. Your dreams carry you through fields of lotus, under stars that smell like resin and fire. Nemi is there. Harik nods from a stone bench. Nahir whispers something you don't catch, but you feel it, like scent on a breeze. The workshop fades. The Nile softens, and your final breath smells like blue petals in the sun. The fire has burned low now. Only embers remain, soft and orange, casting quiet shapes across the stone floor. The jars are sealed, the scrolls rolled, the reeds tied in even bundles. Your work is done. Your story told. Breathe in slowly. Imagine the faint scent of almond oil warming in the morning light, the whisper of crushed mint against a clay bowl, the hush of sandalwood cooling on linen. Feel your muscles soften, your hands rest. You've spent a life chasing something invisible, binding memory to scent, soul to resin, dream to oil, and in doing so, you gave shape to silence. You left behind not a monument, but a trace lingering, quiet, unforgettable, somewhere. A young perfumer will open a jar and wonder why it smells like longing. Somewhere else, A child will lean over a reed mat and press their nose to the earth. Asking what joy is supposed to smell like, they'll find you. Not in name, but in the space between notes, in the warmth of a blend that has no recipe, in the way scent wraps itself around grief and sweetness, and something that feels like being seen. So now, close your eyes, let the night carry you. There's nothing more to mix, nothing more to label, only breath, only quiet, only the soft echo of a jar gently closed. Sweet dreams.